It was the silence that finally told me I had to go. Not the words. The words had been loud, sharp, like kitchen knives being slammed on the counter. But after the shouting there was this silence. A thick, heavy blanket of it smothering the whole house. I stood in the hallway, my old suitcase at my feet, and I looked at the closed door of my son's bedroom. The door was white. I remember thinking how clean it looked. How final. And I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. My heart wasn't in it. My heart was breaking slowly into 1,000 tiny pieces, like a teacup dropped on tile. But my face had just arranged itself that way. A lifetime of habit. When things get too painful, you smile. You smooth it over. You make it easier for everyone else. When my daughter-in-law, Chloe, told me it was time for me to leave, her voice trembling with the anger she'd held back for months, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just nodded. And I smiled that quiet, broken smile. I said, "All right, dear. Whatever you think is best." The greatest pain isn't always in the leaving. It's in the looking back. It's in seeing the empty seat at a dinner table where you used to sit, and knowing that the space you filled might close up behind you as if you were never there at all. My name is Eleanor. And for 2 years I lived in a house that was not my home. It all began, as these things often do, with the best of intentions. My husband, Gerald, passed away 5 years ago. The big house we'd shared for 40 years became an echo chamber. Every room held a conversation we'd had, a memory of his laughter, the ghost of his newspaper rustling in the morning. The silence there was different. It was lonely, but it was my loneliness. I had my routines, my garden. The quiet was something I shared with his memory. Then my son David called. My only child. The sound of his voice always made my chest tighten with a love so fierce it could frighten me. "Mom," he said, his voice bright with forced cheer. "We've been thinking. That house is too much for you. And with the baby coming, we want you closer. We've got the finished basement. It's a proper suite. Your own little kitchen, a bathroom. You'd have your privacy, but you'd be right here with us. With your grandchild." A grandchild. The word was a sunbeam breaking through the gray cloud of my grief. I pictured tiny hands, bedtime stories, the chaos and joy of a new life. I saw myself helping, making soups, folding little socks, being a part of the tapestry of their family, instead of a faded photograph on the mantelpiece. I sold the house. It was a whirlwind. The furniture I didn't give away went into storage. I packed my life into boxes, keeping only what was essential. I told myself I was traveling light into a new chapter. A useful chapter. I arrived on a perfect Saturday in September. David and Chloe's house was beautiful. A modern, open-plan home in a new development. Everything was shades of gray and white, clean lines, polished floors. It smelled of new carpet and lemony cleaning products. It did not smell of old books or Gerald's pipe tobacco, or my rose-scented hand cream. It was a fresh start. Chloe was 6 months pregnant, glowing but with a tiredness around her eyes. She hugged me tightly. "We're so glad you're here, Eleanor." David beamed, hauling my suitcases inside. For a moment, standing on that pristine doorstep, I felt a surge of pure hope. This was right. This was where I was supposed to be. My suite was indeed in the basement. It was clean and newly painted, but it had no windows to the outside world. Only small, high windows looking up into the well of the foundation. The ceiling was low. The constant hum of the furnace was a companion I hadn't asked for. David called it a garden-level apartment. It felt more like a very nice bunker. But I shook off the feeling. I was being ungrateful. I unpacked my photo of Gerald, my favorite teacup, my worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. I tried to make it mine. The first few weeks were a honeymoon period. I was careful. So careful. I never went upstairs without an invitation. I texted before coming up. I washed my own dishes in my little sink even when I ate with them. I wanted to be a blessing, not a burden. When little Maya was born, my world narrowed and expanded all at once. She was perfect. Holding her for the first time, that warm, sleepy weight against my chest, was like finding a piece of my heart I never knew was missing. I offered to help with the night feeds to let Chloe sleep. I'd sit in the rocking chair in the silent, dim nursery, Maya snuffling in my arms, and feel a profound ancient peace. This was why I came. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the weather in the house began to change. It wasn't a storm. It was a slow drop in pressure. A chill in the air where there used to be warmth. It started with the small things. The way I did the dishes. One evening after a lovely dinner I'd cooked, a roast chicken, David's favorite, I was cleaning up. Chloe walked into the kitchen as I was hand-washing the good chef's knife. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, her voice light. "Too light. We just put that in the dishwasher. It's dishwasher safe." I held the soapy knife. "I know, dear. But I've always found hand-washing is better for the edge. Your father, Gerald, he taught me that." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure. But the dishwasher is just so much easier. We like things easy around here. We." The word hung in the air. "We have a system. We do things this way." I was not part of that we. I was an observer of it. I quietly placed the knife in the dishwasher rack. "Of course," I said softly. Then it was the groceries. I wanted to contribute, so I'd buy a few things. Some fruit. A loaf of that seeded bread David loved as a boy. I put them on the counter. Chloe would later move them. The bread would go into a specific bread bin. The fruit would be rearranged in a ceramic bowl on the island, in a way that was more visually cohesive. My purchases, my small offerings, were absorbed and corrected by the silent, efficient system of the house. I began to feel like a guest who had overstayed her welcome but hadn't yet been asked to leave. A polite ghost tiptoeing around my own family. The biggest shift was with Maya. As she grew from a newborn into a chubby, curious infant, my role became unclear. When I'd pick her up if she fussed, Chloe would appear, as if by magic. "I've got her," she'd say, gently lifting Maya from my arms. "She probably just needs her mom." One afternoon Maya was playing on a mat. I got down on the floor with her, my knees cracking in protest, and made silly faces. She giggled, that pure bubbling sound of joy. I started singing an old silly song I used to sing to David. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Chloe was working on her laptop at the table. She didn't look up, but her typing stopped. The silence after my frail, off-key singing was absolute. Then she said, without looking at me, "We're trying not to use such archaic lullabies with negative connotations. We have a playlist of curated, developmentally appropriate music for her." I felt my face grow warm. My silly, loving song was archaic. It was inappropriate. I slowly got up from the floor, my bones aching more from the rejection than from the hard wood. "I see," I whispered. I went back downstairs to my room, the sound of the furnace humming my only lullaby. David was my bridge, but the bridge was weakening. He worked long hours. When he was home, he was tired, pulled between his wife, his child, and his mother. I saw the strain in his shoulders. I tried to talk to him once when we were alone in the garden. "David, is everything all right? With Chloe and me?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. He pretended to be very interested in a rose bush. "It's fine, Mom. It's just an adjustment. For everyone. Chloe's just very particular about how she wants things with Maya. It's her first baby. You have to understand." I did understand. And because I understood, I swallowed my hurt. I made myself smaller, quieter. I tried to become no trouble at all. An unspoken list of rules began to govern my life. Rule 1. Do not give unsolicited advice. When Maya had a slight rash, I bit my tongue instead of suggesting the oatmeal bath that always worked for David. Rule 2. Do not interfere with the routine. Naps, feeds, playtime. All were scheduled with the precision of a laboratory experiment. Rule 3. Your past is not their present. Stories that began with "when David was little" would trail off, met with polite smiles and quick subject changes. My world shrank to the basement and the few sanctioned hours I was allowed upstairs. My connection to Maya was reduced to watching her through the lens of Chloe's smartphone. As photos and videos were shared in the family group chat, I'd smile at the screen, my thumb hovering over the heart icon, feeling 1,000,000 miles away. The holidays were the hardest. My first Christmas there, I asked if I could make my gingerbread cookies, the same recipe my own mother used, the one David would sneak dough from as a boy. Chloe was decorating a geometrically perfect, bare Scandinavian tree. "Oh, that's so sweet," she said. "But we've already ordered a curated cookie assortment from the artisanal bakery downtown. And we're trying to limit refined sugar for Maya." There it was again. I nodded. Of course. They sound lovely. On Christmas morning I came upstairs early, wearing the new sweater I'd bought for the occasion. The presents were under the tree, wrapped in matching paper, elegant and sparse. There was a small pile for me. Lovely, thoughtful, impersonal gifts. A scarf. A fancy candle. A gift card. I had gone overboard for them. A beautiful necklace for Chloe. A fancy toolkit for David. And for Maya, a handmade quilt I'd been stitching in secret for months in my basement room. Each square a different color, soft and warm. I'd poured my love into every stitch. Chloe unfolded the quilt. "Oh, Eleanor, this is so much work. You shouldn't have." She folded it neatly and placed it aside. "We have so many blankets and we have to be careful about loose fibers and Sid's guidelines, you know." It was placed in a closet. I never saw it on Maya's crib. Later, as we ate the silent, perfect breakfast, avocado toast and smoked salmon, not the cheesy eggs and bacon of Christmases past, David looked at his phone more than he looked at any of us. Chloe scrolled through her feed. Maya played with the expensive, minimalist wooden toy she'd been given. And I sat there surrounded by my family, feeling more alone than I had in my big, empty house after Gerald died. I missed the mess. I missed the noise. I missed the love that wasn't so carefully managed. That night, back in my basement room, I took out the old photo of Gerald. "I think we made a mistake, old man," I whispered to his smiling, frozen face. But then I thought of Maya's laugh. And I stayed. Winter turned to spring. The tension was no longer a chill. It was a crack in the foundation of the house, slowly spreading. The breaking point, or rather, the series of small breaks that led to the final one, began with something so trivial it was laughable. A chair. I found an old, slightly wobbly wooden stepstool at a thrift store. It reminded me of the one I had in my kitchen for years, the one David would drag over to help me cook. I thought it would be perfect for when Maya was older so she could stand beside me at the counter and stir cake batter. A future memory I was clinging to. That I brought it home, fixed the wobbly leg, and gave it a fresh coat of cheerful yellow paint. I left it drying in a corner of the garage. Chloe saw it. "What's this?" "Oh, it's just a little stepstool for Maya for later," I said, my voice hopeful. She picked it up, turned it over. "It's cute, but it's not certified. The weight limit is unknown. And the paint, is it non-toxic? Lead-free." The next morning I went upstairs with red-rimmed eyes. I tried to be extra cheerful, extra small. I made breakfast for everyone. Chloe came in, looked at the eggs I'd made, and without a word, scraped them into the bin and started making herself avocado toast. That was the moment. That simple, quiet act of rejection. It wasn't angry. It was absolute. It said, "What you offer is not wanted here." I looked at David. He saw it. He saw the eggs in the bin. He saw my face. And he looked away. He picked up his phone and walked out of the room. My bridge was gone. The final act didn't come with a dramatic fight. Came on a Tuesday. A rainy gray Tuesday. Maya was napping. David was at work. The house was quiet. Chloe came downstairs. She rarely did. She stood in the doorway of my room, not entering. She held a folded piece of paper. Her face was pale set. "Eleanor," she said. Her voice was formal, like she was talking to an employee she was about to let go. "We need to talk." My heart began to thud against my ribs. "Of course, dear. Come in." She didn't move. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. And David and we've talked. We think it's time for you to find a more independent living situation." The words were so clinical. Independent living situation. I just stared at her. She took a step forward, held out the paper. "This is a list of very nice senior apartments. Some have wait lists, but we're prepared to cover the first few months' rent to help you get settled. We've even contacted a realtor to sell your furniture from storage, to give you a nest egg." She had it all planned. The apartments. The money. The disposal of my old life. It was a kindly presented eviction notice. I felt dizzy. The walls of my little basement room seemed to press in. "David agrees with this?" I managed to ask, my voice a dry whisper. "It was a joint decision," she said, her eyes unwavering. "This isn't working for anyone, Eleanor. You must see that. You're not happy here. We're not happy. Maya needs a calm, stable environment. She needs an environment without me in it," I heard. All the air left my lungs. All the fights I didn't have, the words I swallowed, the love I tucked away. They rose up in a bitter tide. But what came out wasn't anger. It was a profound, weary sadness. I looked at her, this young woman I had tried so hard to love as a daughter. I saw her fear, her need to control her world, her desperate desire to be the perfect mother, in a perfect home, without the messy emotional complication of a grieving grandmother with old-fashioned ways. And in that moment I pitied her. I pitied the perfect, brittle life she was building. A life with no room for a wobbly yellow stool, a silly old song, or a handmade quilt. I took the paper. My hands didn't shake. They were terribly, terribly still. "All right, dear," I said. And then that smile. That broken automatic smile. "Whatever you think is best." She looked startled, as if she'd prepared for a battle and found surrender instead. She nodded, turned, and left. Her footsteps on the stairs were quick, light. The sound of freedom. I stood there holding the list. I looked around at my basement room. The photo of Gerald. The single teacup. The book on the nightstand. This was not a home. It was a waiting room. And my number had just been called. I didn't wait for David to come home. I didn't want to see the shame in his eyes, or hear the excuses. I took my old sturdy suitcase from the closet, the one Gerald and I had taken on our honeymoon, and I began to pack. I packed slowly, folding each item with care. I was leaving their world. I would do it with dignity. When David came home that evening, I was in the hallway upstairs, my suitcase at my feet. He froze. He saw the suitcase. He saw my face. "Mom, what's going on?" "Chloe and I talked," I said, my voice calm. "It's time for me to go." Panic flashed across his face. "Go? Go where?" "Mom, we talked about options. We didn't mean you had to leave right now." "I think it's best," I said. "Clean break." "But where will you stay?" That was the question, wasn't it? The question that had kept me silent, small, and smiling for 2 years. Nowhere else to go. I looked at my son, my beautiful boy. I saw the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who'd cry on my shoulder after his first heartbreak. The man who'd held my hand at his father's funeral. That man was gone. Buried under the weight of his own new family. His own compromises. "I'll figure it out," I said. And I meant it. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a flicker of something other than sorrow. It was the faint, cold spark of self-preservation. Chloe came out of the bedroom then. She stood behind David, a silent sentinel. She didn't look triumphant. She looked scared and a little sad. But she didn't ask me to stay. The silence then, that was the worst of it. The three of us standing in that beautiful, sterile hallway. The only sound was Maya babbling softly on the baby monitor. My granddaughter. I wouldn't see her take her first steps. I wouldn't hear her say my name. I leaned forward and kissed David's cheek. It was cold. "Goodbye, David. I love you." I turned. I picked up my suitcase. I opened the front door. The cool evening air rushed in. It smelled of rain and grass and freedom. I didn't look back. I stepped out and I closed the door behind me with a soft final click. The first night I stayed in a hotel by the highway. It was clean, anonymous. I sat on the edge of the bed, the hum of the air conditioner replacing the hum of the furnace. I expected to fall apart, to crumple into a heap of despair. But I didn't. I felt hollowed out, empty, but also light. The terrible weight of not belonging, of being a constant, silent disappointment, was gone. I had hit the bottom, and the bottom was solid. I could push off from it. The next morning I made 2 calls. The first was to my old friend, Margaret. We'd lost touch a bit since I moved. Her husband was gone, too. She lived in a cozy little apartment in the town where I used to live. Eleanor. Her voice was warm with surprise. "Is everything all right?" I told her. "Not everything, but enough. I've left David's. I'm in between places." There was no judgment, only immediate practical love. "You come here right now. You'll sleep on my sofa as long as you need to. Don't you dare argue." The second call was to the storage facility. "I'd like to see my unit," I said. Sitting in Margaret's living room, surrounded by her mismatched, comfortable furniture and the smell of her cat and good coffee, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. We talked. We cried a little. We laughed a lot. She didn't see me as a problem or a shadow. She saw me as Eleanor. Just me. A week later, with Margaret beside me for moral support, I opened the storage unit. The door rattled up, and a cloud of dust motes danced in the sunlight. There it was. My life. My furniture under white sheets like ghosts. Boxes labeled kitchen. Gerald's study. Photos. I walked in, my footsteps echoing. I pulled a sheet off my old armchair. The floral pattern was faded, one arm worn smooth by Gerald's hand. I sank into it. It creaked, a familiar, welcoming creak. I started to cry then. Not the silent tears of the basement, but deep, shaking sobs. I cried for the life I'd left behind. For the grandmother I wouldn't get to be. For the son I felt I'd lost. Margaret just held my hand and let me weep. When the storm passed, I felt cleaner. Lighter still. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked gently. I looked around at the remnants of my past. "I'm going to build a present," I said. My voice was shaky but clear. I didn't look at Chloe's list of senior apartments. Instead, with Margaret's help, I found a small ground-floor apartment in a quiet complex in my old town. It had windows, big ones, that looked out onto a patch of grass and a young maple tree. The sunlight poured in. It was old, a bit dated, but it had character. It had potential. I sold some of the furniture from storage. The formal dining set I never loved. The bulky entertainment unit. I kept the essentials. My armchair. My bed. The kitchen table where David had done his homework. I painted the walls a soft, warm cream. I hung my pictures. I placed Gerald's photo on a bookshelf in the sunlight. Slowly, box by box, I built a home. Not a perfect one. Not a modern one. My one. It smelled of the lemon polish I liked, and the lavender from a plant on my windowsill. David called. Of course he did. The first few calls were filled with guilt and strained apologies. "Mom, I'm so sorry. It all got out of hand. We never wanted to. You know you can always come back if—" "I'm not coming back, David," I said, my voice kinder than I felt. "I'm home." There was a long silence. "Are you okay? For money? For everything?" "I'm fine," I said. And for the first time it was true. "I'm figuring it out." The calls became less frequent. They were awkward, full of the things we couldn't say. He'd tell me about Maya. She was walking. She had 10 words. They were all careful, surface-level updates. He sent photos. I'd look at them, my finger tracing the screen over her little face. The love was still there, a deep, permanent ache. But the desperation was gone. She was their daughter. I had to accept that my role in her life would be whatever they allowed it to be, from a distance. I had to let go. Not of love, but of expectation. Months passed. I found a rhythm. I joined a weekly book club at the local library. I started volunteering there too. 2 mornings a week, sorting books and helping with the children's story hour. Reading to a circle of wide-eyed toddlers, I felt a piece of my heart heal. I wasn't reading to Maya, but I was sharing that love. It mattered. I planted a container garden on my little patio. Tomatoes, herbs, some flowers. My hands in the dirt felt like a prayer. I reconnected with other friends. We'd have tea, go to the movies, talk about nothing and everything. Some days were hard. Mother's Day was a quiet storm of grief. I didn't hear from David until the evening, a brief text. "Thinking of you today." I sat in my armchair, looked at Gerald's photo, and let myself miss the messy, noisy, loving Mother's Days of the past. Then I made myself a nice cup of tea and called Margaret. I was learning the difference between loneliness and being alone. Loneliness is a hollow feeling in a crowded room. Being alone, that can be a choice. A space to breathe. To remember who you are when you're not trying to be who someone else needs you to be. I was Eleanor again. Not just David's mom or Maya's grandma. I was the woman who liked historical novels, who was terrible at crossword puzzles, who sang off-key in the shower, who made a mean shepherd's pie. I was a friend, a volunteer, person. One afternoon, about 8 months after I left, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there stood Chloe. She was alone. She looked thinner, older. Her eyes were nervous. She held a bag from a bakery. "Eleanor," she said. Can I come in?" My first instinct was to say no, to close the door, to protect the peace I had fought so hard to find. But I saw something in her face. Not the rigid control, the polite distance. I saw fatigue, and something that looked like regret. I stepped back. Of course. She came in, her eyes taking in my small, cluttered, sun-filled living room. It was the antithesis of her pristine house. She saw the books piled on the table, the quilt, a different one, thrown over the back of the sofa, the thriving spider plant on the shelf. "It's nice," she said, and it sounded genuine. I made tea. We sat at my small kitchen table. The silence was heavy, but not hostile. Finally she spoke, her eyes on her teacup. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I didn't say anything." I waited. "I'm so sorry," she said again, her voice cracking. "For everything. For the way I treated you. For making you feel unwelcome in your own family." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I was so scared. Of not being a good mom. Of doing it wrong. And you represented everything I was afraid of. The old way. The judgment I imagined. I thought if I controlled everything I could be perfect. And your love for Maya was so big, so natural. Felt like it was showing me up. I thought I had to push you out to make space for myself." The words tumbled out, raw and honest. It was the real conversation we should have had 2 years ago. "I was so wrong," she whispered. "I've been so unhappy. David and we've been struggling. The house is so quiet. It's perfect and it's empty." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming. "Maya asks for you." She points to pictures. She says, "Gemma?" In that little question voice. "And I have to tell her you're not here. Because of me." My own tears came then. For the lost time. For the pain we'd all caused each other. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I just needed you to know. I am sorry. From the bottom of my heart." I took a slow breath. The anger I'd buried had long since turned to ash. All that was left was a deep, weary sadness, and a flicker of compassion for this young woman who had been as lost as I was. "Thank you for telling me, Chloe," I said. "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I didn't see how much pressure you were under. I'm sorry I tried to love Maya in ways that made you feel inadequate. I was lost in my own grief and I thought moving in would fix it. It wasn't fair to any of us." We sat there, 2 women who had hurt each other deeply, sharing silence and tea. She didn't ask to come back into my life. She didn't ask for anything. Before she left, she took something out of her bag. It was the yellow step stool. "David fished it out of the recycling," she said, a small shaky smile on her face. "I've been keeping it. I thought you might want it." I took the stool. The cheerful yellow was a bright spot of hope in my hands. "Thank you," I said. She left. I placed the stool by my kitchen counter. It was too tall for it, really. It looked silly and out of place. I loved it. David came to visit a month later. Just him. It was a Saturday. He brought lunch. We ate at my small table. It was awkward at first. The ghost of the hallway of my suitcase stood between us. But we talked. Really talked. Not as mother and obligated son, but as 2 adults who had been through a war and were surveying the damage. He cried. My strong son put his head in his hands and wept for the hurt he'd caused, for his own weakness, for the family he thought he was protecting but had instead fractured. "I failed you, Mom." "No," I said, holding his hand. It was so big now. A man's hand. We all failed each other. We all tried to play parts that didn't fit. He told me about the pressure he felt. To provide the perfect life. To be the buffer. He admitted he'd been cowardly. He'd chosen the path of least resistance, and that path led right out the door behind me. "I miss you," he said, his voice thick. "The house. It's not a home without you in it. It's just a showroom." That meant more than any apology. We have a long way to go. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly, brick by careful brick. I see Maya now, but on my terms. They bring her to my apartment, or we meet at the park. Chloe is tentative, respectful. She watches me with Maya, and I see her trying not to correct, not to control. She's learning. I'm learning too. I ask before I give Maya a cookie. I follow their rules in front of them. It's a dance. It's not the grand, messy daily grandmotherhood I dreamed of, but it is something real. It is honest. They've invited me for dinner at their house. Several times. I've always found a reason to say no. Until last week. It was David's birthday. He asked me personally, "Please, Mom, just for cake. It won't be the same without you." So I went. I walked up to that familiar door, my heart pounding. Chloe opened it. She smiled a real warm smile. "I'm so glad you're here." The house was still beautiful, still clean, but there were toys scattered in the living room. A blanket was crumpled on the sofa. There was a smudge of something on the stainless steel fridge. It looked lived in. Dinner was simple. Pizza because it was David's favorite. We ate at their beautiful table. Maya, now a talking, laughing toddler, sat in her high chair. They had brought down a booster seat for me to use. It was the yellow one. My yellow stool repurposed. I sat there in my old spot, but it didn't feel like my spot anymore. It felt like a guest seat. And that was okay. It was more than okay. It was right. I was no longer the live-in grandmother, the silent shadow. I was Eleanor, David's mother, Maya's grandma, who lived in her own apartment and had her own life. I was a guest in their home and I was welcome there. The empty seat had been filled by someone else, by their idea of a perfect family, by my own ghost. Now the seat was just a chair, and I was just a loved visitor sitting in it for a little while. As I helped clear the plates, Maya toddled over and wrapped her chubby arms around my legs. "Gemma," she said, clear as a bell. I picked her up. She smelled of soap and pizza sauce. She rested her head on my shoulder. It was a perfect fleeting moment. A gift. Later, as I was leaving, standing at that same front door, David hugged me tight. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, son." Chloe hugged me too. It wasn't stiff. It was heartfelt. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I walked to my car under a sky full of stars. I didn't look back at the house. I looked forward to my own small apartment, my own bed, my own quiet morning.